Hello and welcome to today's web seminar, Leverage DevOps to Create Team Autonomy and a Continuous Culture, sponsored by Perfecto and featuring Ofer Karp, SVP of Engineering at Perfecto, and Carlo Cadet, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Perfecto. I'm your host and moderator, Josiah Renaud. Thank you for joining us today. Before I hand it off to the speakers, let me explain the controls on this console. If you experience any technical issues, please send a note through the question field located beneath the panels and we'll be on hand to help as quickly as possible. Our responses can be read in the Q&A panel to the left of the slides. This is also the same way to submit questions. We welcome all comments and inquiries during today's event, so feel free to ask as many as you'd like, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. To optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience possible, please be sure to close out any unnecessary applications that may be running in the background. At the bottom of your console is a widget toolbar. These widgets open panels. The console opens with 3 on your screen: the speaker, Q&A, and the slide panels. All of these panels can be moved around and resized to your liking. If you accidentally close one, click the respective widget to reopen the panel in its original place. Hover your cursor over these icons to reveal labels identifying each widget. Through these icons, you can download speaker slides, as well as share this event with friends and colleagues. Lastly, this event is being recorded and made available for on-demand viewing. Once the recording is ready, you'll receive an email with instructions on how to access the presentation and slides on demand. With that said, I'd like to introduce and pass controls to our first speaker, Ofer.
All right, thank you, Josiah. Do you hear me well?
Yep, everything's coming through clear.
Perfect, so I'll just start. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks everyone that sent questions prior to this webinar. I know that some of you have probably attended multiple sessions about this DevOps topic. I'll try to give you a different perspective and to actually talk about our experience with the journey toward DevOps. So let me just start by quickly introducing myself. So my name is Ofer Karp, and my official title is SVP of Engineering for Perfecto. But usually when I introduce myself, I say that what I do is actually I'm the DevOps leader for the company. And that's because DevOps is such a critical aspect in my vision and such a critical aspect in the way that I perceive my leadership role in the company. But what exactly does it mean, and what exactly do I mean by saying DevOps leadership, and why should someone care about DevOps at all? So DevOps, of course, is a huge buzzword that everybody is talking about, but when you drill down into the details, typically you find out that different people means different things when they talk about DevOps. So some people are talking about tools, some people are talking about processes that are part of the software development lifecycle. Some people are talking about organizational structure, changes that they have done, and to be honest, they are all correct. But my definition of DevOps it's not only about the way you run the engineering organization, but it's also and mainly about the way you position the engineering organization within the entire company, so that the engineering organization will be able to make a better and a more significant impact on the business results of the entire company. So that's all probably sounds right, but let me try to explain how exactly we did it. So this is kind of a spoiler to the outcome of the journey that I'll talk about, the journey that we've been through for the last 2 years in Perfecto. And we managed to do quite important things in different aspects of the company. So first of all, as it goes to the product, we are now building products that are much better, in the sense that we can build them faster and release them to market faster than most of our competitors. We have a better market fit when the product is actually going live, better quality and performance in the product that we are releasing. In the service aspect, we have a much better KPIs for availability and performance. And all the customer service shows that we have much better customer satisfaction, and this is something that is increasing constantly. On the financial axis, we were able to reduce the churn, or to improve the customer retention, which is very important to a SaaS company, of course. So we were able to increase customer retention by more than 50% year over year for the last 2 years. And we were able to reduce the unit cost by 45% over the last 2 years. From an organizational perspective, we now have a much more flexible engineering organization, which is more efficient. And I'll explain later what actually it means, but that's in very high level, the outcome of the journey. But in order to really understand what we did and the journey that we went through, you really need to go back 2 years and to understand where we started. So we started around middle of 2015 with an organization. We didn't have an engineering organization. What we had in place were 2 separate organizations, one for R&D and one for operations. Each one of them was growing really fast in terms of headcount, reaching something like 60 headcount per organization. From architectural perspective, the product was built as one big monolith that was released to production every 2 or 3 months, depending on how efficient the team was at that specific time. It was deployed to production as a managed service. So each one of our customers had a dedicated system, which made the thing pretty hard to scale and expensive to operate. And then in terms of the market forces, of course, as a successful company, the market forces were always more customers onboarding, more devices to operate, more regions, more products. And the market was amazing. To be honest, when I joined the company, it was all about how quickly we can adjust with our existing products and how fast we can build new product, because the market was actually booming with opportunities. So when I try to drill down and understand why it's so hard for us and so expensive for us to actually follow those great opportunities, I got different responses. So when I talked with the dev guys, they told me, you know what, we are up to it, but the operation guys are blocking us. So for example, we want to start using public cloud like Amazon Web Services or Azure, but the ops guys are not letting us do it. Or we want to start using a new database, let's say a NoSQL database, but we are not allowed to do that. On the other side, when I talked with the ops guys, they told me, you must be crazy, because those R&D guys keep on throwing at us new product that doesn't work, and we are busy making customers successful with the existing products. So now you're talking about building more product and releasing them faster. This is not going to work. So the actual outcome of that situation back then, 2 years ago, was that in order to build new stuff and in order to scale, the only way to do that was to try to increase the headcount and to try to increase the budget fast enough so that we will be able to get more throughput. But that wasn't that efficient. And of course, while doing that, we created more and more technical debt, which started biting us as we ran faster and faster. And the actual reason, if I need to name one specific reason, were the handoffs and the delays and the wasted investment that comes with those handoffs between development and operations. So it was kind of easy to convince ourselves that DevOps, with all the hype around it, is the solution. And we, like everyone, we attended lots of webinars and read a lot of theoretical materials. And that was quite easy to understand that that's what we need. But the problem was where to start. Because when they talk about DevOps, they talk about the destination. They talk about the desired outcome, but they never tell you where to start. So you look for books, you look for online courses, even we looked for consultants that can help us. But again and again, what we experience is people telling us where we need to get, what is the autonomy of DevOps, but nobody told us how to do that. So what we did is actually, we said, let's do the opposite. Instead of wasting all our time in trying to envision where we want to get, let's spend as little time as possible on that, and let's jump right into it and start actually executing and implementing and fix the course as we go. So what we did is basically spent a few days on saying what is the vision, and in very high level, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve. So it's very, very basic, as you can see on this slide. We said, okay, we want to take those two separate organizations and build one engineering organization. We want to have like as independent as possible teams that has end-to-end responsibility for different services. And then we want to have an SRE team that will be responsible for actual production systems, but just for the 911s and the actual customer, very, very basic customer calls about service disruptions that should be minimized. In terms of the architecture, we said, okay, we have a monolith. Let's try to build microservices, start moving from monolith to microservices, mainly as an enabler for the independent teams that is described in the org section. Let's try to move from managed services into a multi-tenant solution, but of course we can only do it gradually. We cannot do it in one big bang. And let's try to use public cloud wherever is possible, because we felt that with the quickness of scale that we had to achieve, the only solution would be public cloud. So we didn't go deeper than that. We just defined few goals, like and some assumptions, like that we want to move from a quarterly release into a daily release with a full continuous delivery pipeline. We assume that we are going to grow the usage of the services that we are building is going to grow around 200% year over year, at least for the coming 2-3 years. We wanted to, we set up a goal to reduce the unit cost by at least 25% every year. And we said that we must, while doing that, we must also improve the service level around availability and performance by at least 20% year over year. So nothing too deep. We just, discussed it in order to create a common baseline, and then we jumped right into it. The one last thing we have done before jumping into the water was to try to also map the risk, or actually talk about what can go wrong and what would be the reason for failure if this would actually happen. So it was very easy, because people immediately said, okay, the guys in R&D will say that they don't want to do operational stuff, and the guys in operation will say that they don't trust R&D to actually directly access the production systems. So you can actually sum it up with one sentence, which is the comfort zone alert. So people were very comfortable with the existing situation where everyone has a very specific role, and everybody did one thing but did it well. And those handoffs, while being very inefficient internally for most people in the organization, it was kind of their comfort zone. So it was the main risk was how to take people and move them out of this comfort zone. In addition to that, also related was the fact that outside of the engineering organization, most people that I talked with about this DevOps agenda or DevOps vision, they kind of listened and said, okay, if this is what makes you happy, but they consider it as a waste, at least until we can prove otherwise. So actually, what I realized very quickly is that my real challenge, at least in the beginning, was to prove that this DevOps thing is working, because lots of people were so skeptic, lots of people were so comfortable with the existing solution that it was really, really hard to move them to the next level and to actually kick it off. And this is where we invented something we called the V strategy. And the V strategy, V stands for vertical. So we decided that instead of going horizontally and fixing everything, we will just go vertically. We'll pick one specific problem at a time, and we'll try to tackle this problem with a project. So let's try to better understand what this strategy means. So the first part of this strategy is about identifying the right project. Every time you start a project, the challenge is to pick the right one. The way we do that was actually to answer four questions. First question was, are we solving a real pain? And by real pain, what I mean is that, do we have a problem now? What is the problem that we have? And what will happen if we will not solve the problem? So the definition of real pain is that the problem, if we don't act on it right now, is just going to grow and is going to reach a situation where it's going to block us, not just kick us a bit or beat us a bit. It's going to completely block us if we don't act on it right now. The second question in identifying the right project was, who are the stakeholders that are suffering from that pain? And by stakeholders, I don't mean someone virtual, like a customer or someone in operations or someone in customer support. It needs to be actual people. It needs to be people that you can talk with, and they can give you the impact that will be if you can solve this problem, if you can give them a cure for that pain. The last question was, are we going to improve DevOps-wise while doing this project? So this one is the most tricky, and the answer for this question can change according to the type of projects that you've done before the specific. But my goal was that every project that we'll do, not just bring us direct value, but also give us the confidence that in the future, when we approach the next project, we will have more confidence in our ability to be successful, okay? So that was the first part of the V strategy. The second part was not to try to go too big too quickly. So actually, I call it start small and stay focused. And by that, I mean, let's start with a single project. Let's pick the right project as described in the previous slide. Let's build a strong team. A strong team is a team of people that really believe in the vision of DevOps and have the capabilities to actually execute on this end-to-end autonomy and end-to-end ownership and responsibility for the new service that you're building. If you don't have those people, and that was kind of the case back then, recruit them, even if it means that it takes a bit more time. For example, if you don't have the right leader, team leader, stop, recruit the right team leader, and only then proceed to actually running the project. Then, once you start the project, allow the team, give the team the full freedom to pick the best tools, the best technology stack, the best architecture for the task that you give them. And once they complete the project, which should happen in no more than 2 or 3 months, then make it a showcase. Talk about it with everyone, both internally in the engineering organization, as well as externally with other people in the company. And then once the first project is successful, gradually scale it out. Now take different pains, different type of pains, and different people, different stakeholders that are suffering, and start scaling this DevOps thing and running multiple projects in parallel. And the last thing in the V strategy is be careful of projects that has highly likelihood to be failure. So everything that has the word entire or the word across is something very, very risky. So don't, for example, don't try to take the entire UI of your monolithical application and rebuild it in a new technology. That's not a good candidate for a DevOps project, at least initially. Don't try to replace your database. Don't try to lift and shift your monolith from on-premise into public cloud. All of those cross or horizontal projects are not a good pick for this phase of your DevOps journey. So that probably makes sense, but it sounds very theoretical. And in order to actually explain what the V strategy means, let me give you a couple of examples for projects that we actually went and built. So the first project was about reducing cost and improving the performance of a specific use case of the product. So naturally, I will not go and drill down into the technical details, but we had one very important feature in the product that allows our customers to take screenshots from a device while a test is running, and then I use this screenshot and in order to actually look for text that should appear on the screen while the screenshot was taken. And that was done using an OCR technology that we had from a company called Abby, and this was running on servers that were directly connected to the devices. So for each two devices, as you can see on the left side, we had a server running this Abby software, which is super expensive, and doing this OCR procedure for the functionality to work. What we did in this project was to move from this setup. We didn't change the functionality. We kept the same capabilities that the customers had before. We just changed the architecture. We built a centralized cluster running in the cloud in Amazon AWS of Abby servers, very strong servers. And then every time a device needed this OCR capability, instead of accessing the connected server that was serving it, it did connect the cluster and got the same capability, the same OCR functionality from the cluster. The result was reducing the cost, both the license cost for the Abby software significantly, and also the hardware cost of those small servers. I'm talking about hundreds of small servers, and replacing them with a cloud service that ran on a dedicated and optimized hardware. The additional implication, business implication, was that customers got better performance. So the time it took to actually run the functionality decreased thanks to the new architecture. So if we look at it according to the vStrategy standards, who are the stakeholders that were suffering? So first of all, the CFO, because we paid a lot of money to support the functionality with the old setup, the old architecture, and with the new functionality, we decreased the unit cost dramatically. Second, the customer, which, yes, they had the functionality, but the performance of the feature was not good enough. And second, the operations team, because setting up those hundreds of servers and deploying upgrades and patches on them, as you can imagine, were very, very time consuming. So by moving to the new solution, all those three stakeholders got benefits. And if we try to look on how big was the impact, so from financial perspective, we are talking about annual saving only from this project of over $1 million. And from performance perspective, which the customers felt, the performance was improved by more than 50%, the response time of the transaction for the OCR. So that was the first project that we've picked. And lastly, about the vStrategy, we talked about what was, are we improving DevOps-wise? So the answer is definitely yes for this project, because we introduced new tools, and you can see some of them here. We moved to from monolith to microservices. This was actually the first microservice that we have built using technologies like Docker and using configuration management with Puppet and few other tools. We actually changed the whole process of building and delivering the software into a continuous delivery. So we built the new service in a way that we can continuously release it to production. And actually, this is what we have done. Immediately after the first release, we started a cadence of every week a new release to production. And most important was that the team, the three people that actually built the new service, that executed this project, was fully responsible and had full ownership for the service from planning to actually operating it in production. And just as an example, they created their own dashboard where all the monitors and alerts were populated into, and they, as the service team, the developers, were responsible to actually track and act on those monitors and alerts if something happens in production. Another thing, they created their own Slack channels in order to do this collaboration. So everything about managing the service, about deploying new versions, about understanding the status of the service in production was done in a collaborative way through a Slack channel that they created, and all the other stakeholders that are relevant were invited to participate in this Slack channel. So that was the first example. And then, as the V strategy says, we immediately jumped to the second project, and we looked for a different kind of project that solves a different type of pain for different stakeholders. And this time what we picked up was a new product offering, something that was for a very long time was in the backlog, in the product backlog, but for some reason, the organization, mainly because of the handoffs, the organization struggled to deliver on. So what we said, okay, let's try DevOps. Let's create a dedicated team with end-to-end responsibility, and let's give this team the opportunity to build this new product. And it doesn't really matter right now what the product is. The important thing is that was a product that for very long we wanted to build. So our customers needed this functionality. Our sales organization really wanted it because they had the feeling, which later on was proved right, that they can sell it if we have the product. Our product managers really wanted it because they envisioned it as a differentiator against our competitors. And even our CTO was talking about it as something that puts us in a different ground in terms of being able to build the future vision of the company from product perspective. So that was the stakeholders for project 2. The business impact was huge. So right after we released the first version, the MVP of this new product, which took us something like 4 months in this case, right after it, we got something like 30 customers onboarding. We are doing, I can't give you the exact number, but few millions of dollars annually from this young product. And we actually see this today as a market differentiator that puts us in a completely different ground as a company. In terms of how does the second project, the new product that we've built using DevOps, how did it improve our DevOps capabilities? So here we introduced new tools. So things like service discovery, things like tracking the usage using Google Analytics and a few other tools. So we've improved on the tools access. We've improved on the process aspect because this was the first time where we actually managed to build quality end-to-end as part of the service delivery. And then in terms of the culture, the team understood and actually acted on building a product end-to-end from definition to actual working with customers within the team responsibility. So to give you some pictures, so from quality perspective, we moved all the QA engineers that we had as an external team into the service team, specifically in this project. So all the QA activities was done in the service team, and they actually managed to reach 100% automation. So there was zero manual QA or manual testing before the release of the product or any subsequent release of the product, and we have a few releases every week. Then in terms of tracking and analyzing the production usage, it was the first time where developers or engineers actually started to track what customers are doing with the product. Not just what the product can do for customers, but what really customers are doing with the product. So they created the Google Analytics integration and some dashboards, and they put it on monitors where they sit, and they actually make team meetings and decisions about backlog priorities according to indications that are coming from production. And that were just a couple of examples. I can of course, if we had time, give you many more examples. The important thing here is that after a while, let's say 10 projects, it becomes like the natural way for the organization to deliver product, to deliver functionality to the market. So we kind of built a timeline, a business value timeline, where each new service, each new project that we have done using the V strategy, we put it on the timeline, and we mapped the different stakeholders and the different business value and put it on the timeline. Okay, so right now we are over 25 projects like that, and the speed of doing that, of executing those projects, is just increasing. All right, Carlo, your turn.
Great, thanks very much, Ofer. You know, one of the things in this conversation that we're having is DevOps really changes the organization, the culture of the organization, and for those people who are down the journey, really the expectations and responsibilities of developers. So we wanted to open up a poll to understand to what degree has developer responsibilities changed in your organization? So great, we have some responses that are rolling in right now. One of the things at Perfecto is that the responsibilities of an individual developer has dramatically changed, and this is what Ofer is going to share with you very shortly. So it's good to see the results coming in, and it seems as though the audience is agreeing that with over 70%, almost 80% of you are seeing the same thing that we are seeing, with dramatic results.
Right. And then, Carlo, this is completely aligned with what we saw internally in Perfecto. I think this is the major change that we have seen, the shift in the definition, in the nature of the role of a developer. So let me just take it from here and talk about, you know, what we realized. So I showed you this timeline with the value and the series of projects that we managed to release thanks to DevOps. But in addition to this direct value, and in addition to people both in the engineer organization as well as outside of the engineer organization starting to realize this value and starting to come and talk to us about what have we done in order to transform engineering so dramatically, when looking internally, when looking inside, we started to realize that our organization has changed. It was a gradual change, but it was a dramatic change. So what I'll do in the next few slides, I'll talk about the changes that we kind of saw, and probably the people that responded to the question with yes, it changed the role of a developer would be happy to see, and I'll be happy to share what we saw in that regard. So the first and most obvious change that we witnessed was productivity. So the graph that you can see here talks about or indicates the number of story points, which is our way to measure velocity and productivity, the number of story points delivered per month between January 16 until July 17. Okay, and you can see that gradually we increased the number of story points. We actually increased the throughput of the engineering organization without increasing the headcount. So the green bar indicates the headcount, and the yellow bar indicates how many story points we were able to deliver to production. Okay, so that's a growth of over 80% in less than 2 years. The second change that we saw was quality. So the number of escaped defects, that was the most important KPI, the number of escaped defects that we had dramatically reduced. And internally, what we've seen is the level of test automation coverage grown by more than 200%. And this was mainly driven by those new products. So for the big monolith, we didn't try to cover, we didn't try to catch up with a huge technical depth. The decision was, instead of catching up with the depth, let's take functionality from the monolith, rebuild it separately as a new service, which is independent and built from scratch. And in the new service, let's put quality KPIs and goals that are much higher and much better. And by that, gradually, when looking at the overall picture, we increased our automation coverage. The third change was about our deployment and upgrade procedure. So if in the past, before this DevOps journey, our release cadence was, as I said, every quarter or so, now we have daily releases. In some of the services, in some of the new services, we have even more than that. We have multiple releases per day. And another factor that changed was the upgrade. So if in the past, every time we wanted to release a new version, we had what we called a change window, which for the customer actually meant 4 hours of system downtime. Now we have a seamless upgrade. So now all the new services, and that was part of the definition of release criteria, all new services were built in a way that we can deploy, our continuous delivery pipeline can actually execute without customers even knowing that we are deploying a new version. So that's another change, major change that we've done. Number 4 talks about availability and performance of the services. So first, we started measuring it. Before that, some functionality was measured, some function in terms of performance, some functionality was kind of missing that was part of the technical depth. And again, because of the handoffs, because of the strong line that we had between dev and operations, it wasn't that clear before we started DevOps who is responsible for actually defining those monitors. Now it was very clear. The service team should be the one that is defining the monitors, executing the monitors, and tracking them in production. And if you don't do it, it's your responsibility. You cannot blame anyone else like your ops guys, because they are not supposed to do it. And we've seen that service availability as a result, for example, grown by more than 400%. The next one, which I already talked about in the context of the web project, the second V strategy example, was about the involvement of the engineers in actually setting up the agenda, in actually understanding what the company does and what will make us successful as a product, the product strategy. And that was achieved by having people tracking and having people analyzing the actual usage of the services that they build in production. So you build a service, you've done all the preliminary discussions about an assumption about what customer needs. Now it's your responsibility to actually measure it and to actually act on it. If you see that specific features are not being used, you need to analyze, probably together with the product managers, but it's your responsibility to analyze why are those features that we invested so much in are not being used, and vice versa. If we see that something that we have built is being used very, very excessively, now it's the time to see if we can increase the value and if we can build additional features that will make around that specific area that it will make our customers even more productive and even more happy. So that's another major change. The next one was and to me that's the base for everything, is system architecture. I mean, some people are trying to do DevOps without understanding that system architecture is the base for everything. If you're trying to take an old system, which is a monolith with a huge technical depth, and say, okay, now I'm telling people that they have full ownership and responsibility, but I don't let them change the architecture, I mean, I'm setting them up for failure. So what we did, we decided that every new project that we do is not going to touch the monolith. The only touch on the monolith that you are allowed to do is deleting code. So you're building a new service, and you can see on the left side the old architecture, on the right side the new architecture, with a couple of examples for new services that we have built. So we have torn up functionality from the monolith, from the center, created a new service that is independent, with a team that is responsible to build and operate a new service, and then we deleted the functionality from the monolith. We kept on doing that, and we are now over 25 microservices and growing. So changing the system architecture is both a result, but also a reason why the DevOps agenda was so successful in Perfecto. The next one was, and again, I slightly touched about it before, was about the methodologies and tools. So before we started, we had a very well-defined technology stack and very well-defined mandates around which tools you are supposed to be using for every type of activity that you are doing as a developer or as an operational, as an engineer in operations. What we did with DevOps, we said, okay, you are a new team, you're a service team, you are building a specific service, you know and you decide what is the best technology stack and what are the best tools that should be used in order to build this and operate this service. So we started to see a huge addition of tools into our technology stack and tool set. In the beginning, it was, some people were afraid. Some people said, okay, we are going to lose control. We are going to lose the ability to move people from one team to another because they are using different languages and different stacks. But to be honest, this was one of the best decisions that we have done because this creates ownership. If you get to choose the technology, if you as a developer get to use the tools, to choose the tools that you're using, you are by definition responsible to the outcome and responsible to actually use them and optimize the way you use them. So that's ended up with, you know, what you see right here and additional tools that were introduced since I created this slide. Now it goes to the org structure. So that's quite typical. We had two separate organizations before the change. In the yellow here was the R&D, and in blue it was the operations. Both of them, or each of them, was very hierarchical. So here you see only two layers, like groups and teams. But in reality, in some cases, some of the branches were even deeper than that. So we had like multiple levels of managers. And what we end up right now is a flat organization where I, as the DevOps leader, have teams, 6 independent service teams, each one of them responsible to one or multiple services, reporting directly to me. So we have a service team leader that reports directly to me. And then we have two slightly different teams, one for the SRE, which is the production support, production infrastructure support, tier 1, and then the customer support organization, which is mainly working with customers. So we went from a very, very siloed and hierarchical org structure into a flat organization with flexible teams that can do lots of things. So you have all the functions in each of the teams, both developers and QA and people that are system administrators, usability experts. So each team has all the function it needs in order to be completely independent and build and operate services without being dependent on external teams. And that brings us to the question that Carlo asked about the developer role. So the change in Perfecto was very dramatic. So before DevOps, the role of a developer was a code writer. So typically each developer was writing code either for front end or for backend, and typically in one language. If you were writing backend code, you would probably be using Java. If you were writing front-end code, you would probably be using JavaScript with very specific frameworks that somebody chose for you. That was the past. And now the situation after the change is that a developer, it means it's not really a developer, it's more like a software engineer. You have like when you write code, you do like a full stack. So you can touch both front-end as well as back-end, and you do it in multiple languages. So we have code written in Java, in Scala, in Go, and in Node.js. And if people are coming to me and asking me to use new languages, my initial response is, why not? Go ahead. We have the software engineers responsible for not just building, but also executing and analyzing the tests. So there is no longer a QA team. The test automation or the quality responsibility is on the developers, on the team itself, as well as the monitoring and alerts. So they get to define what is a healthy service and they get to implement and to respond to the monitors and alerts that indicates whether the service is indeed healthy. We already talked about the production usage metrics and trends, which is yet another responsibility of what used to be a developer. And one additional and very important is the responsibility for cost. So yes, it's great that you built a new service, it's great that you deliver it quickly, but let's talk about how much it cost us to build and to operate the service. So you have a dashboard, and for example, if the service relies on a cloud, on a public cloud infrastructure and platform, then you need to explain why is it so expensive and what can you do in order to reduce the cost of the service, because that was one of our objectives when we started. We wanted to reduce the unit cost by at least 20%, 25% year over year. And for that, it's the responsibility of the service team to optimize the cost of the service. So we kind of switched from a situation where in the kitchen, every person was doing one specific thing, like there was the guy peeling the carrots and the guy preparing the sauce and the guy that is actually serving the food to the people in the restaurant, into a situation where every person does everything. So he can prepare the food, he can serve the food, and he can ask the people that are eating the food whether the food is good and make the decision of how to improve it going forward. So from being a worker in the kitchen, you become like the vice president of the restaurant, and you kind of own a dish in the restaurant end to end. That's the metaphor that I'm using. So in terms of HR, that's the last change I'm going to talk about. In terms of HR, this also changed naturally the way we hire, the way we train, and the way we do talent management to our employees within the engineering organization. So from having people that are expert in a very specific technology, and the aspire in life was to become super expert in that specific technology with a very narrow but deep perspective on what the product does, and an approach of, okay, let's build the best solution, always let's build it ourselves. We went into quite the opposite of looking for people and training people to become cross-domain knowledge. We are looking for people that want to learn new technologies and want to understand additional aspects of the software development lifecycle, not just how to write the best code, that has end-to-end perspective on what does it mean to be a service owner, what does it mean to use the service that you're building, and what does it mean to operate it. And the approach in life is not always to build the best solution from scratch, but rather let's find a good enough solution, preferably something that is open source, and let's gradually enhance it to be suitable for the specific use case and the specific service that we are building. And in terms of open source, if possible, let's also contribute back to the open source community. So that was the last change that I wanted to talk about. And of course, this is an endless race. It's not that I can say right now that I'm happy with where we are and we can sit and wait and everything is working smoothly and perfectly. That race never ends. We always try to improve. We always try to redefine and do additional things to become more efficient and to be able to scale further with this DevOps journey. All right, this is all I had for today. I really hope it was interesting and that it gives you a different perspective to what you typically hear on a DevOps session. And with that, opening it for questions.
All right,
Ofer,
perfect.
that was fantastic. There have been a few questions that have come in, and I was wondering if we could dig into a couple of them.
Sure.
First, can you elaborate on the SRE model and also address the question of, do those players rotate across teams, or are they assigned to a specific team?
Right. So the SRE team, what I did, again, I tried not to reinvent everything. I just took the Google SRE book, and if you are not familiar, you should be. And I bought it. I bought copies of this book to be in the office and for people to read it. So the definition of SRE was taken directly from Google. What it means is that we have people that have production orientation, people that even if they are not the strongest developers, they have the strongest background in things like storage, things like networking, the things that typically behave differently between our lab in R&D and production because of scale, because of, I don't know, everything that happens in production. So we took those people, we created a dedicated team which is not rotating, but then in addition to those SREs that are there in order to actually respond quickly, we also define an on-call person for each of the services. So every time the SRE is jumping on a production incident or issue and is not able to solve it within a few minutes, he has a defined person in the service team, a developer that has a deeper knowledge in the actual code of the service, and he can call him and immediately jump on a bridge and start debugging the service. So the SREs are the immediate response, and the on-call person in R&D is like the second tier that we try to minimize the involvement, but it has to do, of course, with the level of maturity of the service, how good the service is.
Great, that's fantastic, Ofer. And then the other question came in with regards to quality initiatives. And can you talk a bit about the test automation tools specifically that the team is using?
Right, that's a great question because Perfecto, as probably you know, most of the people on the webinar, that's what we do. We sell test automation platforms and tools and methodologies. So the idea here was to try to do what we pitch our customers. So to try to use the same tools, the same frameworks, and the same methodologies as we preach. So if we talk about Selenium, for example, as a tool for automating web UI testing, let's use Selenium internally to test Perfecto UI. If we talk about Espresso as a tool to test Android application, as a best practice for testing Android application, let's use Espresso for our own Android agents that are part of the Perfecto solution. Same goes not just for frameworks and tools, but also to methodologies. If we talk about doing quality within the cycle as part of the continuous integration process, let's do the same thing that we pitch. So let's have the test being executed as part of the build process, and let's fail the build if some of the tests are failing, and or another example, if the build time because of the test execution exceeds a threshold that we define, for example, 30 minutes. So the same things that we pitch in regards to test automation, we are trying to use and we are trying to do in-house, kind of drink your own champagne, I guess.
Fair enough. Moving on to a different topic with regards to the microservices strategy, why can you express why you chose a microservices strategy as opposed to simply lifting and shifting the monolith into a containerized strategy?
Yeah. So to me, that was the only way. That was an enabler for the independent team, autonomous team. I mean, I cannot ask someone to be responsible and to own a thing that he didn't write, that he cannot, like there are boundaries that he cannot cross. There are modules in the solution that I ask him to own and to be responsible for. There are boundaries that he is not allowed and code that he is not allowed to touch. That was the assumption. So microservices specifically was, I mean, a kind of a random pick. I mean, if we had a different architecture, and probably in 2 years, there will be a hype around a different architecture. That was just something that was there and enabled us to go to the autonomous team. The objective was team autonomy, ownership, and responsibility. So microservices is not something that is like a religion to me. If someone comes to me and say, okay, there is a better solution from architecture perspective that still gives me the ability to define ownership and responsibility, I will definitely listen. Because microservices also have downside. Once you create a distributed system, it comes with challenges. Lots of technical challenges around networking, performance, monitoring, transaction tracing, lots of things that are coming with microservices. Most of them are solvable, but it creates additional complexity. Let's say that way.
Great, great. What type of feedback have you received from your developers, individual developers? Are they loving the change, or are they concerned with the change?
So that's a great question. And the answer is that I get the two extremes. I either get developers that are super happy, that feel that this is the best thing that happened to them, and this is preparing them not just to becoming a better developer, but also for progressing with their careers. So they now have more opportunities to become different things, either individual contributor on multiple domains like automation, test automation, monitoring, service discovery, all kinds of different aspects of software development, or to becoming a manager or an architect, because now they see the full picture. And seeing, not just seeing, but also being hands-on on multiple aspects is a huge advantage for them. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is that people that simply don't like it. People that tell me, you know what, Ofer, that's not the reason why I joined Perfecto, and that's not even the reason why I went to computer science school. What I want to do is write code, and every second that I'm not writing code, to me, is waste. So, to be honest, some of those people left the organization. In some cases, they were good developers, so it wasn't that good for us, but that was the only solution, and that this is some kind of a victim that we had to give in order to achieve the big picture. So the answer is two extremes, either very happy, which is the most, or very unsatisfied to the level of actually leaving or just not being productive anymore.
Great. Thanks very much, Ofer. This has been fantastic. Let me hand it back over to Josiah.
Sure.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, and that is going to end our event for today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Ofer and Carlo, for their time. I'd like to thank Perfecto for sponsoring this event. Also, a special thank you goes out to you, the audience, for spending the last hour with us. Have a great day. We hope to see you at a future event.